Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
We made a public statement to the police and also the people of the state and told them, we understand there's a crisis, which is a sanitary crisis, but there's also a social, mental, spiritual, and emotional crisis, even a family crisis that is going on, that is generated or that is produced because of the measures that are so restrictive, if I could say. And so we were beginning to see a lot of people fighting against depression, fighting against, discouragement and isolation. And so we said to the authorities that according to the law and according also to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada, we will reopen our doors, even though it is prohibited to do so according to the decree. We will open our doors by a specific date, and we will have to, go after, judicially speaking, to sue everyone individually that will try to hinder, the rights that we have to gather together freely in this country. So this is what we've done. We made a public statement through video and also in writing.
Hey everybody, Alexa for Ribbon News, and I'm here today with Carlos Norbal. He is the pastor of the church Église Nouvelle Création. So, hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Mighty fine.
So I know that because I'm a new reporter for Ribbon News, but I heard about what happened to your church during the pandemic. Can you actually tell us a little bit what happened?
Well, when the pandemic first started back in 2020, we were told that we would have 2 weeks of curving the curve in terms of the infection or the pandemic, so that we would just remain confined, locked down for 2 weeks. After those 2 weeks, we would be able to revert back to our normal lifestyle and to be able to gather together without any restrictions. But unfortunately, the 2 weeks became 3 weeks, 4 weeks, months. After the first lockdown, we began to see that it was something else that was going on in terms of the pandemic that they were talking about.
And I know that the police came a couple of times and the mainstream media. What did happen, actually?
If my memory serves me right, after the first lockdown, we had a few weeks where people could gather. I think it was around summer, somewhere around there. And afterwards, we began to see a shutdown of the coming togethers, the people gathering together in churches on Sunday mornings. Everything began to be shut down. The restrictions began to be imposed once more. And I began to look at the actual data of the people that were getting sick of the disease, the age group that was targeted by this disease, and the restrictions that they were putting on the church began to affect the people pretty much. The mental state of our congregants was affected. People's morals were very low. People were discouraged. They weren't able to socialize and interact with each other. They've been, imprisoned, if I could use the term, imprisoned for many weeks and many months, when we were now close to the autumn season, around September, October. And we got aware, we were made aware of a law, and the law is the Article 176 of the Criminal Code of Canada, giving us the opportunity to congregate or come together for religious purposes, and that it is a criminal act to intimidate a minister, a religious minister, in his ministry or is in his gathering. It is a criminal act to stop him, intimidate him, or even try to hinder any gathering for religious purposes. And so we begin to evoke and invoke that law. So with one of my colleagues, we made a video and we made a public statement to the police and also the people of the state, and told them, we understand there's a crisis, which is a sanitary crisis, but there's also a social, mental, spiritual, and emotional crisis, even a family crisis that is going on, that is generated or that is produced because of the measures that are so restrictive, if I could say. And so we were beginning to see a lot of people fighting against depression, fighting against, discouragement and isolation. And so we said to the authorities that according to the law and according also to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada, we will reopen our doors, even though it is prohibited to do so according to the decree. We will open our doors by a specific date, and we will have to, go after, judicially speaking, to sue everyone individually that will try to hinder, the rights that we have to gather together freely in this country. So this is what we've done. We made a public statement through video and also in writing. And so we began to open our doors. So when we did open our doors, when the other churches had their doors closed because of the decree to keep the doors closed, the police corps began to gather in front of the church, and they would respect the service time that we had, and they would just leave after every service. So we did that for 6 weeks and 8 services consecutively, including the midweek service. And they respected our rights to be able to gather together without being imposed to close the doors. One of the things that is very important to state is that we've made available the gel to disinfect the hands. It was readily available at the door. We had the masks in great quantity that was available for people that wanted to wear the mask. And so when people began to say in the newspapers, for example, La Presse came after us, Journal de Montréal began to do articles, and other newspaper outlets and TV news began to talk about what was going on. They were scandalized, but in truth, we're only exercising our right as citizens in a free country, according to what we understand from the Charter and also the Criminal Code, to be able to do so as a religious organization, if you will. And so when these people came after us, they began to tag us as anti-masks, but we're not anti-mask. We're pro-choice for the right to wear the mask or not. We're pro-life in that sense, and we're pro-liberty in that sense, where if a person feels more comfortable to wear the mask, let him wear the mask. If he's not comfortable to wear the mask, let him take the choice by himself with a clear conscience. And so we're against the obligation, we're against the imposition, because we believe it's a prelude for tyranny in the country. If we allow this in the name of health, I think there's greater things that will affect our health because of these laws and these decrees and this regime that is starting to appear in Canada.
And when you say to me that the police was there every time that you was going to do your speech at the church,
yes,
do you find that is a kind of intimidation?
Well, the thing is, when some of us began to inquire to the policemen why were they there, they would not answer. And one of which at one point said that he was there, or they were there, to ensure that everything goes smoothly in terms of security-wise and whatnot. Because according to them, some people were not enthused, and they were not rejoicing that we were gathering still, despite the decree that was imposed. And so some policemen told us that they're there to ensure our security. So I said, if that's the case, that's okay. If that's the case.
Because we know that Canada is a religious country, but Quebec unfortunately, we don't really practice anymore. You are one of the only church actually have been heard in Quebec, especially Montreal, that you had problem to want to stay open. Like you went against what most of the church have been told to do. But when we look at the rest of Canada, we know that that was a really big problem during the pandemic. Pastors have been arrested. They have been put in jail under
Absolutely.
custody. What do you think about that?
Well, funny enough, because I've been looking at the situation in Canada and in the United States for at least 7 years now. And I saw the social decay and the things that were leading up to what we're living today since 2014. I remember very clearly when I began to understand the change of the regime here, which is pretty much looking more and more as a communist regime, more so than a democracy, if we are forthcoming and truthful with ourselves. When we look at the situation, we see a slow decay. It's a slope towards tyranny that is being done. And so it's being done phases after phase. It's step by step, but we're heading there very fast actually now. That's why back in, if my memory serves me right, back in 2019, I was even involved with one of the parties here that was starting, if we could say, in politics. It's a new party, the Parti Populaire du Canada, People's Party of Canada. And I was involved with that party. Why? Because I wanted people to be aware that we are losing our freedoms, we are losing our liberties, and there is a time that is coming we will not be able to recognize the country that we were accustomed to. And so I got involved with that movement because I identified that this party was promoting the importance of keeping our culture as Canadians and also certainly our freedoms. And I began to say back in 2000, even 2018, 2019, even on the social media platforms, to wake up, especially to my colleagues, colleagues in terms of pastors and priests, to wake up, even Christians, to wake up to what's coming, because there is a time that is coming. We will not be able to gather freely on Sunday mornings. So I just knew that was the logical thing to happen by the way things began to manifest in society and the different laws that were being adopted and different articles that were coming out in the newspapers. So by the time we got to 2020 and when they began to announce the lockdown, I really was kind of perplexed, but also doubtful that it would last only 2 weeks. And so we complied. We obeyed, we followed the instructions, we shut down our churches like all the others. We did everything they told us to do. And unfortunately, it went more than 2 weeks. Now we're talking over a year and a half and we're still in it in a way. And you were mentioning in one of the interviews that we're back to code green. So what does it mean? Are we back to normal, or are we under that same regime still? If green is the new normal, that means we're never going to come out of this new normal, like they say. And so what do I answer to that? I answer that when the shutdown, or especially the second shutdown that was announced, I told the people of our communities, our religious communities, also our ethnic communities, to be watchful, because I don't believe that this first shutdown will remain as such. I believe there's a second shutdown that's coming, and it's going to be more oppressive than the first one. And exactly so. That's what happened. They begin to diminish our numbers to gather together. We have churches that are being shut down. I know at least 3 pastors that are selling their churches because they're not able to make ends meet in terms of financial obligations, mortgages and whatnot. A lot of churches are suffering financially speaking, because when you impose to people to just gather and you're 25 people or 10 people, it's absolutely impossible to make ends meet in that sense. And so very, very clearly, we could see that the measures, or the sanitary measures, have been more detrimental than the actual COVID to the people. and if I could speak from a pastor standpoint to the church as well.
And especially like when you saw like all these pastor have been arrested, like I'm talking about Archer, Pastor Archer.
Pastor Archer Pulaski. We need to remember Pastor Tim Stevens. Let's not forget Pastor James Coates. And these are all examples of Canadian pastors right here in Canada being arrested for the crime of coming together to worship God on a Sunday morning with a free conscience, with a free or freedom to think, or freedom to express themselves, or to gather pacifically in one place. And this is directly against the charter of our rights and freedoms in Canada. And I remember even back in 2018, 2019, I used to tell the people, pastors right here in Canada one day will begin to be arrested. And I remember very clearly the reactions of people, you're exaggerating. We'll never get to that point. Forget about it. But actually, it's happening. It's happening more and more. Pastors are being put to jail. Pastor Tim Stevens was incarcerated, if I remember my memory serves right, even twice already. He's been released, I think, last week.
Exactly.
And so this is a very dangerous precedent. And if we don't wake up now, we'll regret tomorrow. I like what André Pitre always says. He says, in reality, they've not taken our rights and liberty. We have conceded them. We've neglected them. We've given our rights and freedoms over to them. Because if we keep our rights and exercise them, there is absolutely no way that they can take them from us. And so it's like a muscle. If you exercise your muscles, then you keep fit.
Yeah.
If you don't use them, then you begin to lose strength, and you begin to lose the ability to use your muscles. And so it's the same thing. So that's why we've done what we've done. We stood because we stood on a principle of freedom. Freedom according to what we understand from God's word, and freedom as well according to what we understand from our constitutional rights, and also from the criminal code, the Article 176 from Canadian Criminal Code. That's why we stood. And I'd like to even express also to my colleagues that it's important to remember where the church comes from. The church is striving out of persecution. It has always met persecution, and the persecution was always imposed by government, always imposed by people in higher ranks of leadership on a country or on a land. And the first Christians were persecuted because of their faith. They were prohibited to come together as a people for any reason at all, because every generation had their context for persecution. And this right here, for me, is a form of persecution. Funny enough, not only to the church or against the church, but also against the people themselves. This is my personal conviction. It's not my opinion. I think it's a conviction on my part.
And in the others kind of idea as well, what we saw now with the autochthon in Canada, and now they are people assault the church, vandalize, and
they're burning churches down.
They're burning church down, and they put the statue down as well. But now we are talking about a little bit of erasing culture. Mm-hmm. What do you think about what is going on?
Well, the cancel culture that we're seeing today is to be able to manipulate the people even more. So even the people involved in that type of depraved mindset of just destroying culture, destroying statues, destroying history, they're not understanding that they're participating to something that will destroy their own future. Because in that scenario that's coming, nobody's going to be a winner. Even the people that are for that ideology will be victims later on, because we're heading towards total chaos in reality, in terms of social reality. And so in that sense, just burning down churches and not taking the time to study history and to analyze and letting real journalism take place, where people do investigate to see exactly what took place and why were these bones there, what caused the death of these children. Unfortunately, we would be able to avert all this confusion that we're seeing here today. But it's the continuation of that same culture. Just say something without any verification, and people just react emotionally. And this is what characterizes the madness of today. People do not think. People are criminalized if they think. They're punished if they question, and if they study and do research, then they're conspiracy theorists. And so right now, there's a story that came out, and there's a doctor called Dr. Hamilton from a university here in Canada, and he's been given the task to study what really happened. And in truth, these children, these indigenous children, les Amérindiens, a lot of them died because of tuberculosis and other diseases that they did not have knowledge and science back then to be able to treat. And even in the research, when we get to read and to study really what happened, there's one of the reports back that goes back to 1906 from Dr. Peter Bryce that really explains what really took place in that time period. And it had nothing to do with genocide, of killing children with an intent to destroy them. It had to do with the diseases at that time that they would not be able to control as today. They weren't able to provide adequate medicine. And it is known in those days they had more cases of tuberculosis, even twice as much with indigenous children than even white people in those days. And so it's important for us to be able to just come back to our senses and really react, not emotionally, but intellectually. And today we've lost that reflex, unfortunately.
But we need to say that in the media and in the newspaper, they did like all in the same time, like spread the information about like finding body and that was the church that was implicated in that, instead of saying we found this number of body. We need to look at what happened,
what really transpired, what really took place. Exactly.
But they just spread anger and violence that people actually took and spread on maybe the wrong person. And
Absolutely. And people are already cranked up. I mean, we need to remember, we've been clogged and imprisoned, being made captives for over a year now. So mentally, even emotionally, when you walk on the streets, you're driving, you can sense the level of aggressiveness is so high now. People are so impatient. People are so short fuse, like they say. And now you come out with a story like that, it is very easy for people to react emotionally and aggressively the way they've done, because now the influence or the propaganda machine that's coming out from the traditional news now is so perfected. It's so perfected. It's so efficient that they could move a certain segment of the population as they choose. They could make them react because they're not speaking to their brains. They're speaking to their emotions. And so people just react according to their plans. And so in my view, when we look at what took place, we need to remember that it was le ministère des Affaires indiennes that had the responsibility of these de ces pensionnats, these places where the children were being brought up, and also the schools, etc. It wasn't the churches. The ministère des Affaires indiennes took over the Indigenous, I think, Services of Canada, or something to that effect, which is the English version of it, took charge and the necessary finance even to have better services for the orphans back then were not provided to them. So it was very hard for these people to take care of the kids the way the kids were worthy to be taken care of. And so it's very easy to point fingers, but when we begin to study history, history tells us another story.
And especially we need to look at probably who was the Prime Minister of Canada during that time, and as well, like you have lots to
Yeah,
look at it.
absolutely.
And most of people, I don't know if you remember, but the White Book was a treat, like about accepting the autochthon as Canadian, but to erase every other treaty that the Canada and the autochthon did before. So erasing all of that. And it was supposed to be really good, and the autochthon refused it. We need actually to have a look at why.
Listen, there's so many things, and I'm not saying that in the I don't know if that's how we say it in English. I'm a French speaking person. The orphanage, I guess that's how they call it.
Yeah.
The orphanage. I'm not saying everything was perfect. Like I say, there are injustices that went on. I'm sure of it in those days. But to say that purposely these kids were genocide and these bodies that are there are a result of that genocide is not factual according to history, and we need to look at that even further. The other thing I wanted to say, according to everything that's going on, pointing fingers and attacking. We need to encourage our children, our own children, to have a critical mindset, to have the reflex, to be scientific in terms of analysis of the information that is given to them. I think if we start to educate our children very early, we'll make sure that they'll have the tools to build themselves a better future tomorrow. Because I think schools now are doing the opposite. The history classes that were being given, I don't believe they say that's the full story of what really transpired and what happened back even in those times. And even this story that we're talking about, there's a lot of things that took place over a century ago. This has been going on for over a century. But even making mention to what you were talking about, this went on even with Trudeau, the father, and even in his days. And so if we need to look at the people in charge of all that debacle, we need to look at these people that were in charge in terms of political seats of power as well, and what they did to manage these crises and these injustices.
Effectivement.
Yeah.
A little bit French English.
As a matter of fact, non, il n'y a pas de problème.
Exactly.
Pas de problème du tout.
But wow, that's more than I was actually expecting. Do you have actually something else that you want to add on what we're talking about?
Well, I'd like to encourage people to not just be reacting to everything that's going on, but to be observant, to be analytical, just to take the time and be discerning of what we've been given in terms of information week after week, day after day, and take time to really look and see if what is being said makes sense. And I'd like to encourage people to stop being informed and get informed. There's a difference. If you allow yourself to be informed continually, people can feed you any type of lies and you will not be able to decipher these lies. But if you're able to stop, analyze, and see the information and even seek it for yourself instead of receiving it by opening the TV at 6 o'clock or 6 p.m. at night and just being fed whatever they want you to eat and swallow, then we'll be able to have a clearer vision of what's happening and to take good decisions, not only for us, but for the well-being of our children and the generations after us. So that's if I had the message to convey, that would be the message. And I'd like to encourage also the Christians and the pastors, the priests, to remember that our first responsibility is not to the state, it is to God and to the people. And we need to be able to be sacrificial in order to serve God and the people. It has always been so. Jesus is our prime example of that. And all the different leaders throughout the decades, throughout the centuries have done and have given us that same example. We need to be ready to lose so that the others can win. But if we're searching to conserve our comfort zone, we're trying to conserve or protect our reputation, then we'll lose it all. We'll lose the reputation. We'll lose our churches. We'll lose our freedoms, because when you lose freedom, you lose everything. And so I think it's the most important thing to do, not to negotiate or compromise with our values and conviction, and stand for Christ, stand for the church, stand against tyranny, stand for freedom, stand for Canada, stand for Quebec. So that's what I have to say.
And thank you to have been standing and that you stand still. But thanks for that.
We'll continue to do so. It's our mandate. It's our mandate, and it's something that's greater than ourselves. So we have to. I don't see any other choice. There's no other choice. We must stand, and others must stand here in Quebec as well. And I take the time to salute also the pastor from Grace. I think it's Good News Chapel Church in Saint-Honor. They've been standing also over the past few months. I want to salute the pastor, and I'm encouraging other pastors like himself to stand for our country and for the church.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
for
a lot,
your time.
Alexa.
And I hope now you have a little bit more information about what happened really with the church here in Quebec, because it's not something that we heard a lot, but it's a thing. It's happening here as well. And thank you for Carlos Norbal, pastor from Église
Nouvelle Création.
Nouvelle Création. Thanks for him to have been standing up and to still do it now. Mm-hmm. And we hope that this tyranny against the church mm-hmm. will stop. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
And it was Alexa for Rebel News. And thank you for being there and listen what we have to show you from the other side of the story. Thank you. So hey guys, if you appreciate what we are doing and you want to support us, please go to lockdownreport.com and maybe giving a donation to help us to bring you the other side of the story. Thanks.